Um, Ladies and gentlemen, Paula, Lars, and many others whom I know here, I'm of course honored to appear before the Rectors Conference. The Baltic University program is a special thing for me. I remember Lars in the early day. I was then a young Swedish diplomat, specialized on Eastern European affairs and and also working a lot with regional cooperation. So this is perhaps also the reasons why I now have this job for a few years before returning to my foreign ministry in Stockholm. I would like to use this opportunity to tell you a little bit about my organization, the Council of the Baltic Sea States, and then I'd say a few words about what we are doing in the area of research and education cooperation, and I would end with a few personal reflections on why this is important, why what the Baltic University program is doing is extremely important also in my world. And although I'm afraid that in terms of conclusion, I have little to add to what Paula said. I found Paula's remarks very much on the spot, and the question as always remains how to get there. I think the CBSS can be part of the answer on how to increase academic cooperation in the region, but so obviously it's the Baltic University program. We have to work together on these, and the challenges are huge. This is March 1992 in Copenhagen. This is a time, some of you may remember this is the time when there were only 2 EU members in the region. This was Germany and it was Denmark. The German and the Danish foreign ministers initiated the Council of the Baltic Sea States. There were some Swedish ideas in that direction too, but Sweden, mind you, had not yet made up its mind. Did it want to join the European Union? That decision came later. It came in fall 1992. So this was a situation where we had 2 EU members in the Union. It was not at all clear that the post-Soviet states would even be invited to join the European Union at this point. Now, of course, the situation is different, and we've had quite a fantastic 2 decades if we look at the general development of the region. It's been a remarkable period. And this is the most recent high-level meeting of the CBSS. This is the summit at Stralsund, chaired by Chancellor Merkel. This is June 2012, at the end of the German CBSS presidency. We should have had a summit this summer as well. The Finnish CBSS presidency had prepared everything. There was a Baltic Sea week in Turku, based on the principle of coherence, meaning that everything happened for a week in Turku. We had NGO meetings, we had Baltic Development Forum, we had the EU Annual Forum for the Baltic Sea Strategy. There were thousands of people gathered in Turku, so-called Baltic Sea stakeholders, and then there was supposed to be a summit as well. The summit was cancelled. We know why. There is a political crisis now between the EU and Russia, and the situation on the political level is indeed very difficult. And what I would like to tell you is, however, that it is clear that there is a will to go on cooperating in a more practical sense, which you all represent. The EU-Russia cooperation has not been closed down. On the contrary, I go to St. Petersburg next week to participate in a workshop where we will look at what the European Union Baltic Sea Strategy can do for cooperating also with Russia. We will meet with Russian stakeholders in St. Petersburg. This is 28th October. The day after, I go to Kaliningrad to discuss environmental and sustainable development cooperation in the natural park area, straddling 3 countries, Lithuania, Poland and Kaliningrad, how to develop potentially a biosphere in that area shared with 3 countries. I say this because I want to stress that cooperation on this level, on sort of the project level, on the network level, is still alive. But it is not easy at the time, because the political signals are of course quite strong. But my organization represents the will to go on, and there is, except for the cancellation of high-level meetings, there has been no cancellation of other activities within my organization, and I of course hope that this can continue. This is the less high politics. This is not high politics. This is a very practical level. I want to show this picture. This is a youth camp in Kaliningrad. I want to show it to stress that the CBSS is not only about high politics. We have at least one, normally 2 or 3 ministerials every year. But we do practical project-based cooperation as well. And then this youth camp, where we participated with workshops on sustainable development, by the way. It was organized by Baltic 21. This camp is a good example of more concrete activities we try to do. We have new priorities. We used to have 5 long-term priorities. They have fused down to 3 regional identities: sustainable and prosperous region, and safe and secure region. And then we try to work through what we call the project to policy loop, which is that we have summits and ministerials. They give guidance, sometimes steering documents. These result in networks, projects, and communication. And the secretariat, which I lead in Stockholm, is responsible for trying to make it all hang together in some way. This is the world in which we live, seen from a CBSS perspective. Of course, CBSS is in the middle here. I'm not sure Helcom would agree. Helcom would be in the middle in Helcom world and so on, but this is excusable. As you can see, there are lots of organizations dealing with regional cooperation in the region. I'm sure you can think about a few other ones as well, but that is good news. I refuse to see this as a problem. There's very little overlap between these organizations. On the superficial level, you may talk about overlap, but as soon as you start looking hard at what's actually going on, there is little overlap. And all this tells to the basic health of this region. The fact that we want to cooperate through all these organizations and networks is good for the region, and we can of course do even better. The CBSS is also not adverse to the EU Baltic Sea strategies or any regional strategy. We are looking at the Russian Northwest strategy for the socio-economic development of the Northwestern Federal Region as well. It hasn't developed as far right now though, and the Ministry of Regional Development just disappeared, so we have to work more with that strategy. But in the EU Baltic Sea strategy, we are active in 3 priority areas. 3 out of 17 priority areas, I believe, and one of our responsibilities is to make the strategy accessible for neighbor countries who are not part of the European Union. This, in the case of the CBSS, is Russia, Norway, and Iceland. Those are 3 CBSS members which are not part of the European Union, and we try to make relevant areas of the strategy accessible to those countries. This is why I go to St. Petersburg together with the coordinator for priority area education next week. This is precisely what we try to do. And then we are exploring potential common ground as a consequence of this with Russia, and of course the European Union is firmly involved through DG Regio and through the European External Action Service. And those are the rough areas where Russian participation is being discussed, and also Russian accession to the relevant financial protocols. And those negotiations have not stopped despite the crisis, so we are still hopeful that there will be a Russian accession to the project funding for regional cooperation sometimes next year. That's the plan. You perhaps all know this, but I just want to stress, I said that I refuse to see the organizational plethora as a problem. I also want to stress the networks as an asset. I think Paula already did that, but these are just a few examples of all the networks that there are in the region. You know, there are twice as many networks. This is just a selection of them, which are closely related to the CBSS. The CBSS does not own these networks. Sometimes we have been instrumental in making them come to life, but we do try to help all these networks. And the reason, so you will then, when you see these networks, I hope you will understand that education and science is not our only focus. We try to do a lot. I think that the red thread here, the common denominator here from a CBSS point of view is of course regional cooperation as such. We believe that by working together on all these issues, we ultimately build trust. We do perhaps also build identity. This is extremely important also. We can live with several identities without becoming schizophrenic, and Baltic Sea identity can be strengthened. Look at Nordic identity, how strong it is today. It's the result of conscious work over 100 years. We are early yet in terms of Baltic Sea identity, although historically you could argue that it has been perhaps stronger than it is today. Here comes lots of text, but I wanted to say to explain roughly what we are involved in the area of education. We have something called the Project Support Facility, which is a €1 million grant facility, which will last until next year. We have spent 2/3 of it, and part of the 2/3 have been spent for a summer university pilot project where Humboldt University has been in the lead, but also Södertörn has been quite involved. Södertörn University hosted the first summer university this summer with students discussing multi-level governance related issues. Then we have the Euro faculty, which has long been with the CBSS and quite focused on Russia, I should say. We are now in the second, actually we are concluding this, we have concluded the last phase of the Euro faculty Pskov project, which has been about introducing a master's level management education at the University of Pskov. This has been a 700,000 euros project. And we have now also performed an evaluation of the Pskov experiences, or the Euro faculty concept, I should say. And we are, just a few days ago, a report on that was published, and we will discuss that report at the board meeting in several contexts. Actually, this report will be discussed. Perhaps some of you have been involved in producing the report. It's been done partly by the University of Turku and the Baltic Sea Region University Network, another partner of us. Then, yes, here is a few more notes on university and research cooperation. Of course, the Baltic University Program is our strategic partner since, I think, 4 years. And so is the Baltic Sea Regional University Network since last year. I mentioned the Eurofaculty Pskov, the future Eurofaculty concept. I also mentioned the Summer University. And then the last idea or initiative is the Baltic Science Network, which has been proposed by the city of Hamburg, whereby we hope that we would try to create a network of perhaps civil servants engaged in science policy in their respective capitals. It is early yet. We are not yet clear or sure whether there will be enough interest amongst governments concerned. This is being investigated at the moment. We hope to organize a meeting of so-called wise men discussing whether the idea has merit or not. But we have invited the CBSS Council of Senior Officials to nominate such wise men, and we are in the middle of that very process. What we would hope, of course, is that this network could ultimately become a very good way of trying to make progress on regional cooperation in the area of science and potentially also higher education related to science, of course. But there's certainly a lot which can be done in addition. Then in the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, we have the priority area education. It's not we are cooperating with the priority area education, and the coordinator, whose name is Anders Bergström at Föreningen Norden in Sweden, will go with me to St. Petersburg next week. Then we HA Neighbors, which is where the CBSS Secretariat, together with the city of Turku, is responsible, and the workshop I just mentioned. Then I just pointed out the EU-Russia. Perhaps you already know this, but there is of course the Erasmus Mundus partnership, where Universities of Barcelona and Turku are involved on the EU side, and then there is this cooperation roadmap in science, technology and innovation. And we are currently looking at the EU-Russia agenda to see if there is something which can be done in a Baltic Sea region context here. The EU is quite big, nearly 30 countries, and sometimes working also on a macro-regional level with Russia makes sense, and education can certainly be one such area, and already is one such area, I should say. So this is the CBSS perspective of things. We can develop a macro-regional cooperation, a macro-regional identity without harming also the development of a strong European identity. This has been recognized in the EU Baltic Sea strategy. Otherwise there would be no EU Baltic Sea strategy. So finally then, some personal reflections, and again I defer to Paula and others here who have been thinking even more on this. But I think this region is not a bad one for cooperation. It's sort of doable. It's not too small, it's not too big. If you have one representative of each country in the region, it's still possible to have a meeting which lasts for 1 or 2 hours, and which can be, and it's still possible to find a room which is big enough to host such meetings. I like to see this Baltic Sea as an area which unites rather than as an area which divides. It can of course do both, but it can certainly unite. And we have a history together. I mean, most Swedish civil servants used to go to Germany in the 17th century to study. And we have lots of old universities all over the region which still remember their sort of transnational roots. And I think this is a very good start of regional cooperation. There is an idea of the region. And we can of course become much better in sharing regional research infrastructure. There is 1 or 2 projects to that effect, but we could do more progress on that. The European Spallation Source was mentioned as a very good example of that. And the fact that the Baltic University program has developed dedicated education materials based on Baltic Sea experience, I find very interesting. And this is something which could be done not only with respect to sustainable development. You could do it in many areas. To use cities in the region as examples, or solutions produced by cities in the region as examples, or something else. And also students should be encouraged to spend part of their time in one other countries in the region. I think that can be done much more as well. There are a few good examples of this. Why not try to broaden this? And then what I mentioned about the EU-Russia cooperation, which is of course very important. Sometimes we can be forerunners also in an EU-Russia context in this region. After all, this is where the land border between the European Union and Russia really goes. This is the region where we have the land border and where we have the most intensive contacts, I would say. So this is what I wanted to point out, Paula. I'm sure I spent more time than I'm allowed to, but thank you for allowing me to address you here, and I'll be around in case you have any questions later on. Thank you.